Welcome back, everybody, to the Below Average Joe's MMA podcast. What a weekend it was. And you came to the right place to get the recap of that entire weekend. In case you can't tell by our faces, we look a little drained. And maybe that's because we're on the come down right now. We're still buzzing from Saturday night, Dominic.
Yeah.
And you know, I got to ask you off the top, just how are you feeling right now? What is going on with you? Because it's been a very exciting week for us, our podcast, obviously, but also you've had some big decisions you've been making in your personal life. And then you got a card like that on Saturday that's about to give heart attacks out to every damn person that watched it. What's going on, man?
Yeah, this was an incredible week, man. As you all know, or if you don't know, we're going to tell you again. We're video episodes on Spotify now, as well as YouTube. So just another accomplishment for the show. Shout out to everyone, listeners and viewers that support us. Personal life, traded in old Peggy after 7.5 years. My very first car ever as a 16-year-old. We said goodbye on Saturday afternoon. Got a new vehicle. Very excited for that in the future with that car. It was a matter of time, and it finally happened. And then come right home from the dealership, straight into fights. UFC 268 blew the roof off of my house and off of Madison Square Garden. It was just an unbelievable card. One of the best events I've ever watched. I can't wait to recap it with you, Noah. How was your weekend?
My weekend was good. I was watching the fights with a bunch of filthy casuals. But a lot of people, basically, I wanted to go hang out with my friends. But I said, hey, friends, if I come hang out with you, can I please watch the UFC card? Like, nobody has to give me money for it.
Right.
But I just want to watch it. So I bought the pay-per-view, watched it over there. And they all watched it too. And by the end, this is my favorite part, I had multiple people go, I should really watch this more often.
Here it is.
And I was like, yep, that's what I wanted to hear.
Yes.
I said, you know what? If you need an easy way to learn a little bit about the sport, kind of get your feet wet, I have this podcast for you. And I slid the phone towards him.
He's handing out business cards at the party.
That would be me. You know that meme where it's like the guy talking to the girl at the bar and like she looks uninterested in what he's saying, but he's like really into it. Yeah. That's me talking about our podcast.
Exactly.
Nice voice crack. But anyways, let's get into his fight announcements.
Hold on, it's coming. There it is.
So midway through the broadcast, we had a really nice hype video presented to us for UFC 269, a card that is looking every bit as stacked as the two we got these last two weekends. However, couple of noticeable admissions from the card that got presented at the end of that hype video, as Maycee Barber is out of her scheduled bout with Erin Blanchfield, as well as Dricus Du Plessis is out of his scheduled bout with Andre Muniz. While I think personally the Dricus and Muniz fight was one that I was a little more excited for. Sure. Maycee was originally scheduled to fight someone else, I think.
Oh, gosh.
I can't remember who, but it was someone that got taken off the card, and then Erin Blanchfield got put in. And I don't even know if we had talked about that on the show. But let's talk about Maycee Barber for a second, just to give her a moment, because this just feels like another chapter in her kind of story here with the UFC, where she keeps taking like one step forward and one step back. Yeah. And, she's injured. Who knows what it is? And hopefully it won't keep her out too long. But Dominic, is this just always going to be kind of the career of Maycee Barber, just a bit hectic, a bit chaotic? Like, you never know if she's going to be available, if she's going to have to pull out, if she's going to get injured in the fight, if she's going to have a dull performance, whatever it might be. Is it just always something with Maycee Barber?
I sure hope not, man. It is becoming a thing over these past few fights with her, but she's still so young, 23 years old. I still believe in her talent. If she can just put it all together, she's got plenty of time to grow. Again, hopefully it's nothing serious. And again, I just hope that it's nothing, or that this doesn't continue to be a thing for her career. For what it's worth, I was actually with my buddies watching UFC 268, since me and Noah are so far apart these days. And I was looking at the card because they showed the promo, and I'm like, damn, this card is so good. And I was looking at the prelims. This was on there. And it does say, obviously, Maycee is out. There's a rumored fight that was on Tapology, and I've not seen anything like on Twitter, but just to throw it out there because it does kind of make sense. Rumored that Miranda Maverick may just step in and take Maycee's place, which could potentially make sense there. Someone that arguably beat Maycee Barber. I thought she did beat Maycee Barber, to step in and fight Erin Blanchfield, who is a pretty big prospect in her own right. I didn't realize it until I started looking at her stats. So we'll see what happens. But yes, Maycee out. Hopefully nothing too serious.
Yeah, I didn't hear about that fight specifically, but that's good. I did hear something about a verbal agreement for a replacement opponent, but then nothing had been signed. So that would be really cool if that if that verbal opponent is someone with the stature of a Miranda Maverick. That would be more than I would expect. So good stuff. And then for Dricus and Muniz, I mean, two guys that bring such different styles, but are both essentially experts at what they do. Dricus is a fantastic striker, and we know now how good of a jiu-jitsu practitioner Andre Muniz is, breaking the forearm of one Jacare Souza in his final UFC bout. Tough one to lose. I would like to see this fight get rescheduled, but at the same time, if Muniz can stay on the card, also wouldn't bother me if he gets a replacement. But that fight just on paper looks fantastic still.
Yeah, we were so excited when that fight got announced. Dricus is a huge prospect. Muniz is still a prospect, but he's in the rankings. So Dricus was looking to finally crack in. That's a great fight. Hopefully we do see that. And same as goes for him as Maycee. Hope it's nothing serious, because Dricus is a serious young talent from South Africa to add on to that too.
Yeah, true. Just showing the globalization of the sport. And now we do have an actual fight to be announced here, and that's January 15th. Our first card of 2022 as Michel Pereira is back, and he goes one-on-one with Muslim Salikhov. Now, for a lot of you, Salikhov might be a name that'll go a bit under the radar. Michel Pereira, obviously, is probably a bit more well-known to the hardcore fan base just because he's such a wild man and so exciting to watch. But Muslim Salikhov might be the more pristine prospect, if you will, or the guy that I don't know. I don't want to say has a higher ceiling or something, because at the end of the day, despite how good Salikhov has looked in the UFC, he is 37 years old. So there is going to be probably a ceiling at that. But maybe Salikhov has just been the more consistent product. I'll put it that way. While Pereira, I still don't know how good Pereira can actually be.
I know.
You look at kind of his record, and he had an iffy run outside of the UFC, but then in the UFC, he's looked, for the most part, really good whenever he's kind of got into a bit of a zen and just, fought a good fight. Didn't get too wild. I know we love the backflips and shit, but at the same time, it's much to his detriment usually. So what do you think of this fight, and with these two guys kind of bringing a lot different styles here?
Yeah, it's interesting. And like you noted with Michel, we've kind of seen him lately tone it down just a little, and you see more of his potential. He does have a very good skill set. He's powerful. And for Muslim, he's obviously going to look to grapple. So it could be a fun fight potentially. And if it's on the feet, maybe it gets a little rowdy too, because Michel can get hit regardless of who his opponent is. That is a good fight. That is going to fly under the radar of that card for sure. Yeah,
Salikhov is just a very calm fighter in the cage. So it's going to be interesting when he's got to go up against the wild man that is Michel Pereira. But yeah, looking forward to that one. That's all for our fight announcements. Now it's time for the regional showcase.
Yes.
LFA 117 took place Friday night. And Dominic, it was a pretty good card there, I say. And this one was a little more easily digestible than that of UAE Warriors, because we had, I think, 6-7 fights on the card.
Yeah.
I mean, when UAE Warriors gave us like 25. So.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just going to ask you off the top, kind of what stood out to you most from this card, whether it's a single fighter, a fight, or anything about the actual presentation itself.
Well, I did very much enjoy this, watching the LFA. Again, this is something that we're still new to with these regional promotions, so this is why we put this on the show, so we can force ourselves to learn as well as discuss it with you guys. And I'm having fun so far with 2 shows down. LFA is a huge pool of talent that eventually pushed people into the UFC. This was a very fun card out there in California. Gilbert Melendez on the commentary, Uriah Faber doing interviews. It was very neat. And the fight I want to discuss, Noah, was actually the first fight of the night. Jeffrey Craig and Christian Avalos. And this is why. Because it was Jeffrey Craig's professional debut after only having 2 amateur fights, both of which came in LFA. So I didn't know that they do amateur fights there too, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And he just looked very calm and composed. He was defending all of the takedowns. Jeffrey Craig, this is. And I just thought he looked very good. 23 years old to be making your debut in LFA is a big deal to me anyway, rather than starting in a really, really small promotion and working in. And he looked very good on the feet, threw a lot of elbows, spins, knees. He was doing a lot of damage, but was very good defensively as well. Christian Avalos was a guy that had, I think, 7-0 as an amateur, was 1-0 as a pro with a submission. So I just thought it was a really fun fight to start the card with 2 very not so seasoned guys putting on a pretty great performance. I had a lot of fun watching that. And Jeffrey Craig, of course, gets the unanimous decision at the end of the day.
Did you happen to catch how old Jeffrey Craig was? I'm curious.
23 years old.
Okay, I like that.
Yep.
See, I actually maybe just after watching the whole card, it didn't really stick with me that he was making his debut, but that definitely adds a level of interest, in my opinion, because he looked very polished for someone making their debut, at least more than I would expect.
Yes.
And really, I could even say the same for Avalos, his opponent. Even though he came up short here, it was still felt like a very technical bout. And so big ups to both those guys.
Yes.
I'm actually going to go with the bout following that one. Hyder Emil getting the TKO over Hobson Jr. in round 2.
Roller coaster.
I was fully going into this fight. I was very interested in what Hobson Jr. would bring to the table. Well, he's 23 years old as well. From what I understand, very good jiu-jitsu. And, man, Hyder Emil, the guy's 31 years old. And I think he's like 5-0, 6-0 or something like that. I'm struggling to remember now. But I blame UFC 268 for this.
Our brains are rattled.
But all in all, Hyder Emil just putting some punishment on the young Hobson Jr. And,
brutal.
Just looked like he had a lot of power in his hands. Looked like every time he touched Junior, he was just hurting him.
Yep.
The fight probably could have been stopped before it did, but does get stopped in round 2. So, Hyder Emil, I don't know if he really has any long-term potential like a Jeffrey Craig or a Christian Avalos, but still had to give him a shout-out because that was a very good performance against someone who I was probably more interested in going in.
Yeah.
Coming out.
For sure.
We even had just, before we move on, I just want to give a shout out to like our main event, even though it was a bit of a lackluster fight, I would say, having someone that was in the UFC like Michinori Tanaka, just adding a level of credibility to the card, a level of, just making the LFA feel like a little bit more than just a B product or whatever you want to call it, or a minor league, even though at the end of the day, it is pumping out a lot of prospects for the UFC. You had Uriah Faber there talking about him because he is a product of Team Alpha Males. So really cool stuff. I really enjoyed just hearing a lot about Team Alpha Male on this night.
Oh, yeah.
And shout out Gilbert Melendez. I thought he did pretty good on commentary.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the commentary team. It was funny, too. He's teammates with that Hyder Emil. So he was like trying so hard to not go all in on it and like shout out advice. It was cool. But yeah, it was a great show. Loved it. Yep.
And next Sunday, we'll be doing the regional showcase for One Alaska Fighting Championship 161. It's getting cold out, Dominic, and we're taking it to the Arctic.
That's right.
Not quite, but
close enough.
AFC 161. That's happening Wednesday, and we'll be watching it, recapping it on Sunday.
Of course.
So tune in for that. Let's move into Bellator 270. Yeah, Dominic, did you realize that there was more MMA than the UFC this weekend?
It doesn't feel like there was any.
So this was, as I said on Friday, the 5th time that Bellator has had a card in Dublin, Ireland. But it felt like the biggest one. They had committed to giving a title fight to this card. That was the first. I believe, for their Ireland cards. Overall, you have a co-main like Nix and Gallagher. Just they really felt like they were putting some effort into this one, even more so than prior. However, this card felt like a big deal. I'm just going to say that off the top. The crowd did a really good job of adding to the intrigue of the card, of adding to the environment. It just, everything about this card just felt very big, and it really highlighted the co-main and main events, how much they look at guys like Peter Queally, like James Gallagher as stars.
Yes.
You actually were talking about the entrance for James Gallagher. He came out to the Irish national anthem, I believe. But for me, it was Peter Queally's knockout, because I love the song Zombie by the Cranberries. And the whole crowd was singing that song, and I was like getting chills sitting there watching. You couldn't hear
Michael C. Williams announce anything. They just kept singing after the music went off. I guess Zombie's like a big song over there. They talked about it on the broadcast. I forget all the specifics, but bone chilling. I got goosebumps for like 5 straight minutes. It was crazy.
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that before we get into the fights specifically, because I did think this was a great card in terms of atmosphere, in terms of making Bellator feel like a bigger deal. And dare I say, the UFC obviously cashed out big with their Irish market with Conor McGregor, and then we'll talk about Ian Gary in a little bit, but Conor McGregor specifically, they really had got the ball rolling with that. But then it seems like they kind of stopped really emphasizing that market, and Bellator's kind of swooped in under their noses, and now it feels like, for one, Dublin is now like a mainstay for Bellator. Every year, essentially, they're going back there. And, with a card like this and with the atmosphere like this, Bellator might really have a stronghold over that region at this point. And, I think that's kind of cool, actually.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think it was their 5th show in Dublin, Ireland. So.
Yep. I did say that, but...
Oh, yeah, sorry.
But let's talk about the co-main and main events. And ultimately, the headline, I was a little cheeky with it. Ultimately, your hometown heroes do come up short in both bouts, as Patricky Pitbull is your new Bellator lightweight champion. He avenges the loss from earlier this year, gets the TKO over Peter Queally, 1 minute 5 seconds of round number 2. And in the co-main event, Patchy Mix, he did miss weight, but he does come in here and get the submission win over James Gallagher, 39 seconds of round number 3. Now, Dominic, I know you're very high on James Gallagher. You were talking about how you and your dad were watching this card, and when the walkout with the Irish national anthem, you're like, wow, this is crazy. So once you actually watched the fight and how it took place, what did you think?
Yeah, it was an interesting fight. I mean, at the end of the day, this was 2 submission specialists going head-to-head. Sometimes you think, oh, maybe they cancel each other out. Maybe it's on the feet. No. This was grappling 24/7, this whole fight. I had it 1-1 going into that 3rd round, but Patchy Mix made it look so easy in the 3rd. He just, flipped a switch, man. He locked in this guillotine, had it in full guard, then transitioned into full mount, and that's when he was able to get Gallagher to tap. It was not the craziest of fights, but sometimes it's fun to watch those grappling transitions and kind of what goes down there on the canvas instead of a brawl on the feet. So it was a fun fight between 2 young studs. It's a big win for Patchy, but it definitely hurts him a bit that he missed weight. We'll see what Bellator wants to do next for him because of that. And for James Gallagher, I still believe in his potential. I think he's still a great fighter. Back to the drawing board you go. Obviously, when you have the support of Ireland, Conor McGregor giving you shout outs on Twitter and stuff, you're still a pretty big deal. So both these guys still have bright futures ahead, but Patchy Mix was the better man on that night.
Yeah, I can't say that I'm personally surprised, because I'm higher on Patchy Mix. And even when he, you weigh in at 137 pounds, that's 1 pound over, and most people might kind of just go, okay, it's just a pound. But man, you scale that up though, think of if someone's fighting at light heavyweight and they miss by a pound. That's a big like there's a big difference between being a pound over at 135 pounds and being a pound over at 205 pounds or something like that. So his pound over at bantamweight, you scale that up, and that's probably like 2.5, 3 pounds over at a higher weight class. So it does make a difference. But I just thought he was the better fighter. James Gallagher is still so young and still has a lot of potential. And, with the reaction of the crowd, no doubt Bellator recognizes this for him and for Peter Queally and are going to continue to try to hone in and develop their skill set. But Dominic, I'm curious what you think, because as I kind of mentioned off the top, how the UFC almost took it for granted that they were able to get Conor McGregor from this market. And, they really haven't gone back to Dublin much since his rise. So with Bellator really kind of cashing in off that and being able to pick up some good prospects in their own right, is this something that Bellator is going to have a long-term, staying impact in, even over something like the UFC?
I mean, if I'm Bellator, if there's any sort of market or region that I feel like I can capitalize in more so than the UFC, I'm going all in. The chips are on the table. So whether that be Ireland with their 5th show there now, like you said, they went to Russia with Fedor and had a ton of Russian fighters. They went to Paris last year. They're going all over the place, especially during one of the hardest years ever to travel, and they're still finding ways to put on these big fights, and they're marketing their fighters with these locations. So again, if they can do it and they find these little niche areas that they can hit, go all in, man, because Bellator at the end of the day is always, or at least I would think, is always going to be kind of that B side next to the UFC, but they're still big and they still have a big following with great fighters. Take advantage of any place and anywhere that you can.
I do want to mention the lightweight title fight before we move on as well. Patricky Pitbull being able to avenge that loss is definitely a very feel-good title win for him. A guy who's really fought anybody and everybody, over his entire career, but it still found himself in the shadow of his brother Patricio. It's kind of felt like that coming out of the shadow moment a little bit. Patricio obviously being one of the best fighters in Bellator history. It's tough to follow that up, but he is a champion at this point. For how long, though, remains to be seen. I do think that potentially whoever won this bout, whether it was Patricky or Queally, could just be holding that belt until Usman or Magomedov is able to really earn that title shot. So that's something to watch out for. But for now, Patricky Pitbull shines bright.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's move on to UFC 268. And,
oh, boy.
Oh, my goodness. Before we even get into the main event and on from there, just this card in general, Dominic, you are known in these parts as a guy that you really say how you feel in the moment. I don't want to say that you're a guy that gives a lot of hot takes. You do that, but in this case, I don't think it's necessarily a hot take. It's just you're very much however you feel in the moment, you just say it. So when it came to this card and all the action that took place, before we even dig into everything we saw, what were your thoughts at the end of UFC 268?
One of the best cards, top to bottom, I've ever seen. And what's funny is the first 3 fights on the early prelims were rather dull. They were all decisions, and they were, back and forth, but nothing crazy. But then, boy, did it pick up. We went straight into 5 straight knockouts. There were 3 boring decisions, 5 straight knockouts, and then the main card decision, fight of the night, potential fight of the year between Gaethje Chandler. Then you go to Shane Burgos, Billy Q, a decision that goes any other card, that's fight of the night, undoubtedly, but it gets underwhelmed and undershadowed by Chandler Gaethje. Then you go to Frankie and Chito Vera, had a great back and forth fight. Chito puts a stamp on that one. Then we go to the 2 title fights that both went 5 rounds and 2 of the closest title fights in recent memory. Literally one of the best cards I've ever seen. And I'll tell you what, when the UFC goes to New York City and goes to Madison Square Garden, these cards deliver every single time.
Yeah, it's the 5th time, actually. I should have mentioned this because on Friday, I said 5th time Bellator was in Dublin, 5th time UFC was at Madison Square Garden. Previously, UFC 205.
Yep.
Obviously, that card is fucking phenomenal. Yeah. UFC 217.
Even better.
And then you got UFC 230. That was Daniel Cormier, Derek Lewis.
The most random main event ever.
Well, it was supposed to be Nate Diaz, Dustin Poirier. You know. Then UFC 244. That's the BMF. And now UFC 268. So they do, obviously, when they go to Madison Square Garden, they make it a big deal. They make it feel like a big deal. And it did feel like a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
On this night. Now, I do try. That's the only difference between us. I try to, like, keep it, I'm like, okay, great card, fantastic card. When I got done watching it, I definitely thought the same thing as you. But I'm like, man, recency bias. I don't want to do it. I don't want to say it. I don't want to say it's one of the best cards I've ever seen, even if I do kind of feel that way.
Right.
Because I probably would say that almost every month if I really said how I felt in the moment, So all in all, though, it's hard to deny that, like, and what's funny is you mentioned that the first 3 fights being a little dull. I actually really enjoyed CJ Vergara and Ode Osborne. And then I thought Dustin Jacoby, John Allen was a bit of a banger as well. So then you move into that, which are no doubt the dullest fights of the card.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the card is just even better. So madness all around. But our main event, Kamaru Usman does retain his UFC welterweight title once again via unanimous decision over one Colby Covington. So, Dominic, this fight went all 5 rounds. Maybe a lot of people not expecting that, considering the first fight ended via stoppage with Usman winning via strikes, and the guy's only leveled up since then in his striking, and really his all-around game just looks like it's improved so much, while Colby had only fought one time, maybe hadn't shown at least that kind of level of improvement. So I'm curious, are you a little surprised with what you saw on Saturday from these two? And how does this fight compare to the first one? Just give your overall thoughts on these two's performance.
Yeah, so this is weird. We were all sitting there watching it, and Colby comes out. First off, he came out to Kurt Angle's song, which I loved it. That spot on. I called for him to do it. I'm so glad he did.
I forgot that he did it for UFC 245. Like, I forgot that was a thing. So I'm sitting there, and again, I'm hanging out with my friends and, like, my roommate's there, and he's a big wrestling fan, or was a big wrestling fan. So when it came on, we both just looked at each other like, oh my gosh, I completely forgot about it.
So that was badass. But he starts walking to the cage, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, man, something don't look right. He looks tired. He doesn't look there. It didn't feel like Colby to me. It was this weird vibe. So he gets in the cage. They do the announcing. Kamaru wins rounds 1 and 2 quite convincingly. Round 2, he dominated, dropped Colby twice. I think technically it was 2 knockdowns. I'm like, I texted in the group chat. I said, finish incoming in round 3. The tide was so far in Kamaru's favor, on top of the fact that something felt off to me about Colby that whole night. Then round 3 happens, and Colby comes out of nowhere. It looks like the Colby of old. His pressure, he was landing shots on Kamaru, wobbles Kamaru. He wins round 3. Round 4, he looks even better than he did in round 3. Literally with 5 seconds left in that round, wobbled Kamaru badly. And if it wasn't for that horn sounding, there's no telling what could have happened there with his pressure and pushing Kamaru against the fence. 2-2. I'm like, holy shit, this is an instant classic. Now we're going into round 5, just like the first one, 2-2. It comes down to the championship final round. And not only that, it came down to the final minute for me, because the 5th round was so back and forth, so close on the feet. And ultimately, I ended up giving the nod to Kamaru just barely in that 5th round. Truly, this was so amazing that they have an incredible first fight. And you're like, there's no way they can outperform that. And now, this wasn't as good all in all as the first one, but it was just as close competitively. And the fact that they go 5 rounds again was just unbelievable. These two are at the cream of the crop of this welterweight division. the kryptonites for each other, as I mentioned on Friday. And it just felt like such an amazing storyline to go the distance once more. I know it didn't technically in the first fight, but it was pretty much the distance. It was close enough. And then at the end, they hug it out. They share words of respect. And man, did that just feel like a tip of the hat, capping off this rivalry. It was something special. And really, when a rivalry ends like this with such an amazing fight, it's one of those that will, kind of go down in the history books. Two guys that hated each other, and then it ends with them hugging in the octagon. Dan Mergliata telling them to, all right, you guys can kiss later. I thought that was funny. So, amazing fight. Kamaru Usman gets his 5th title defense. All I can say.
You must not have watched Colby's post-fight press conference then, because
I did not.
He continued to say he doesn't respect Kamaru Usman, and
of course
said he's a steroid user, and
of course
he cuts corners and stuff like that.
So the genuine Colby came out for like 30 seconds at the end of the fight.
Well, I know it was a handshake, but at first I couldn't tell what they were saying. I'm like, are they talking shit to each other, or are they saying nice things? But I guess it was a bit of respect. I mean, you share a cage with someone for that long. Like Usman kept saying, Usman said that in his post-fight press conference, to his credit. He said, he's like, yeah, as a person, he's a little rotten. I think that was how he worded it. He's like, but as a competitor, he's like, nothing but respect. You share a cage with the guy for about an hour.
Yeah.
He said it doesn't matter who it is, you're going to respect him. Colby just had much more of how he's been on display in the post-fight.
Yeah.
I was actually a little surprised by that, because his post-fight interview seemed a bit more respectful. He did give a big shout-out to, as he's been doing all week, he said the troops and the first responders. That's been kind of his thing all week. So gave a shout-out to them and to the whole crowd and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So thought that was nice. But then, he was right back to it afterwards. And,
what a guy.
So he said you haven't seen the last of him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of interesting, Dominic, because I can tell by the way you're talking that you feel like this is kind of the end of it, the end of the rivalry, the end of it, because Usman does have 2 wins, so one would assume that. But, depending on what was interesting was in the lead up, I mentioned this on Friday, how I was a little concerned with Usman's mindset, where he was. The guy had shown such a flawless mindset really in his entire title run. And then all of a sudden this week, he's talking about a Canelo Alvarez boxing fight. He's talking about retirement a lot. It was a little worrisome in terms of this fight. No disrespect for wanting to do either of those. Those are make your money, retire if you need to spend more time with your family or whatever. If you just don't want to fight anymore, that's fine. But in terms of this fight, it left me a little bit concerned. However, based on the performance and then even the way he talked afterwards, he doesn't look like he's slowing down at all.
Yeah.
He was very clear about afterwards that he's like, we'll see what's next, and didn't have even a hint of like a retirement. And while people, the press continuously to ask him about the Canelo Alvarez fight, and I don't know why they do it. Please just stop.
Especially after what Canelo did on Saturday.
Please quit feeding into it. It's fine if that's. I get why Usman's calling a shot. The money side of everything. But then, like at the post-fight press conference, this is a tangent. But one of the reporters asked, he's like, you said that you'd be interested in boxing Canelo to really test yourself and to show, for the. I forget how he worded it. It was like for the good of the sport, to really show like the best of the best in boxing versus the best of the best in MMA, as a true competitor. He said, because of that, would you be willing to do it for charity? And Usman was like, what?
Yeah.
He was like, no, I would definitely want to get paid for that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting. I'm just like, okay, what's going on here?
Just don't feed into that narrative.
All in all, I thought this fight was fantastic. Probably not better than the first one, all in all, but like again, I didn't expect it to be. This fight over-delivered on my initial expectations. And neither guy comes out looking bad from this. Obviously Usman gets the win. But Colby, once again, proving that he is the DC to Kamaru's John Jones. He is the Chael Sonnen to Anderson Silva. You know, he is clearly number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he's going to have to continue to prove that because there are still clear matchups for him to go from here that he has not fought yet, and I'm excited about those. But for Usman, he's continuing to gonna be lapping people right now.
Yep.
You know, he's beat Masvidal twice. Now he's beat Colby twice. He's got the 1 win over Burns, and Burns doesn't seem to be going away either, so he may have to fight him again.
Yep.
Then you got the fight in December between Leon Edwards and Jorge Masvidal, where if Edwards wins, he might be next, and then that's another rematch for Usman. So we are truly witnessing greatness.
Yes.
You know, not to copy any of LeBron's slogans, but we are in the midst of greatness. And a big talking point that I heard in the aftermath as well, Dominic, was about Usman's placement amongst the all-time greats. Not just across all weight classes, pound for pound. We know he's the best fighter pound for pound currently in the UFC.
Yeah.
But in terms of all-time welterweights, Dana White said in his post-fight press conference that Usman is the best welterweight of all time.
Yep.
However, I did hear other people ask him questions, and they would word it like, you know, what is it going to take for you to get past Matt Hughes and GSP? So some people seem to put him still below Matt Hughes even. In my opinion, with this win, he's number 2 welterweight.
Yeah.
But again, it's number 2. And my question for you, Dominic, is how close is he to passing the great George St. Pierre?
He's close. And I know, like, title defense number-wise, he's 4 away from tying because he's at 5. GSP had 9. But, man, the way in which he does it. And I know that this was a close one. The first one with Colby was a close one. But, again, that's like his arch nemesis, the rivalry of all rivalries. And he still comes out on top. But then you look at the other title defenses. He dominated Jorge. Then he knocked him out cold. Then he destroyed Gilbert Burns with a jab, mind you. I'll never let that live down. That he did that with a jab.
Might be a little bit. That might be a little bit pushing it with the Gilbert Burns.
Okay, he almost got knocked out by Gilbert, but then he destroyed him ever since in rounds 2 and 3. I'll put it that way.
Okay, all right.
So he's close. He's very close. And I don't know. Like, do you want to compare the specific numbers? Do you want to say, well, if he doesn't get to 9, then he'll never be at GSP? No. I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, we're talking about a guy that is now on a 15-fight win streak. GSP never did that. Never did that. So he's already one-upped him there. He's 1 fight away from tying Anderson Silva for the longest win streak in UFC history. So I think, depending on how his next title defense goes, that may be the icing on the cake. Icing on the cake. Icing on the cake. But if not that one, 2 more at the most, and I think he does. I think he takes over as the best welterweight of all time. But if we're saying that, and a lot of people see GSP as number 1 ever all time, what does that say for Kamaru in terms of all-time GOAT status, Noah?
Well, it's definitely clear that he is making a push for top 10 territory, and if he keeps winning, it's only going to go up. Now, if he does, let's say his next title defense is against Leon Edwards, let's assume Leon does beat Jorge Masvidal. I don't think a win over Leon, as good as Leon is, the fact that it's another rematch, and that's not really Usman's fault. No. It's just, to me, it's like, okay, you've already beat him. So it still does something to his credit and, you know, moves him up, but it still wouldn't put him past GSP for me. However, and we'll see if this holds true, but right now, imagine him versing a surging Khamzat Chimaev in the future. A win over that guy, and maybe we might just be talking about GOAT status right there. Regardless, he looks fantastic. He is the best fighter in the UFC, but I do just want to present a point, and this isn't – I don't want to, you know, be negative to Usman. This isn't really the point here, but as good as he is, as dominant of a champion in some ways that he feels – he does show vulnerabilities.
I agree. Yeah, we've discussed this before.
Like, that's why I kind of had to say something when you were talking about your assessment of the Burns fight, because that fight's much closer than people give it credit for. Burns nearly finished Usman in round one. Clearly won round one.
Yeah.
It's just Usman made the mid-fight adjustments, came back in rounds 2 and 3, looked very good. But then you saw in the first Masvidal fight, as uninteresting as that fight ended up kind of being when it took place, early on, Masvidal at least you could tell made Usman uncomfortable with the heavy leg kicks or the heavy body kicks arsenal. The first Colby fight, obviously, back and forth war. Now the second Colby fight, Colby stunned and wobbled Kamaru multiple times in this fight. You know, obviously Kamaru at the end of the day, he knocked down Colby twice. Dare I say flash KO'd him. That man looked like he looked like he literally was Woody and they were like, Andy's coming, and he fucking dropped, but then he just snapped right back into it. And
shout out Woody.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said for that as great as Kamaru is, you know, each fight is going to feel like, I don't know if we're going to get to a point with him where it's like, it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to win.
Yeah.
You know, a rematch with Leon Edwards is interesting because I don't know if Leon he's a great striker, but I don't know if he has the kind of, well, I wouldn't have said Colby had the knockout power to put away Kamaru, but, you know, he stunned him multiple times. So Leon being a better striker, going into that fight, I'm clearly going to have that at least in my brain that, like, he could stun and hurt Usman and potentially do something with that. And then if he fights Hamzat or, you know, Luke or Gilbert Burns again, no doubt, or is that going to be on my mind?
That's a great point.
I think if anything, that just helps the intrigue and interest in Usman's fights.
Yes,
but I don't want us to get so in love with what he's doing right now that we almost mystify him into being this, you know, GOAT status, this guy to unbeatable force when he does show some vulnerabilities, and that's kind of good for the interest in his fights, all in all.
Yeah, I love that point.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to the co-main event. We're actually, Dominic, maybe we should end on something. I didn't even realize for the Usman-Colby fight, we kind of missed something.
Okay.
As far as what's next, I mean, for Usman, basically, there is two options for Usman. If Leon Edwards wins in December, clearly it's Leon Edwards, right?
I hope so.
But I mean, I don't know who else it could be unless Leon loses. And then if Gilbert Burns gets a fight, let's say against the Hamzat Chimaev or against the Vicente Luque, then you do that. I would say Vicente Luque had put himself in a good spot, but then he missed weight for his alternate spot here in this bout.
Yeah.
Which in the post-fight, Dana didn't seem very happy about. But then apparently I guess he legitimately missed weight. But then if he was going to be the actual alternate, because obviously they didn't need him because Colby and Usman made weight.
Yeah.
He would have been given 2 hours to cut the remaining 2 pounds or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So he wasn't given that. So Dana's like, okay, I like that story a little better, he said. But, you know, I don't know if it'll really set him back. But Luque feels very close. Gilbert Burns feels, you know, still in a good spot. But Leon Edwards is in the driver's seat, in my opinion. Despite how long it's taken him to get a title shot, I still stand by. You watch what happens. I thought the guys who have gotten title shots, I think the Masvidal second one didn't feel like necessarily earned, but besides that, I mean, Gilbert Burns, I thought deserved it. Masvidal the first time I thought deserved it. I thought Colby deserved it this second time. If Edwards beats Masvidal in December, especially if he does it convincingly, no doubt he has earned a second shot at Kamaru Usman.
Yeah, for sure. And if Masvidal wins, like you said, it's kind of up in the air on what's going to happen. We may see quite a layoff for Usman if Masvidal.
I don't know, because he seems to want to be active so much that it wouldn't surprise me if Vicente Luque just is able. If he just wants to stay active
before,
if he just wants to stay active, then next guy up. You know?
Yeah, and
someone's gonna get a title shot, maybe without quote unquote earning it or getting that big win to catapult them. But sometimes that's just the way it works out. And then you have a guy like Leon who has to work seemingly so hard to get a title shot. And it's a lot of it's just timing and situational. Yeah. It really depends on what the other guys in your division are doing. For a guy like Luque, it just helps that he's already beat the champion, that is already beaten so many guys in his division. You know?
Yeah.
And then for Colby, he mentioned in his press conference again that Jorge Masvidal is the guy he wants next.
Makes sense.
He said win or lose against Leon, that would be the fight that he would want. Yeah, and obviously he said it in a much more colorful way. But
yeah.
Is that the fight that you think, if it's win or lose for Jorge, is that the fight you would want to see next for him?
I think if Jorge wins, it makes more sense. I mean, it's still a big fight regardless. The history there between those two, it's going to be massive. But I really like the thought of Gilbert and Colby. It's a fresh matchup, one that has a lot of interesting intangibles because Gilbert's power on the feet, great jiu-jitsu. Colby's a phenomenal wrestler, shown some improvements on the feet. So I think in terms of competitively and sticking at the top and staying relevant and close in terms of title contention, I like the thought of that one, especially if Leon wins. But if Jorge does win, he scoots right back into the top three, and then him and Colby, along with the storyline, just makes even more sense from a competitive standpoint. So.
Yeah, I'm completely fine, win or lose for Masvidal. It'll feel a little bit bigger, I guess, if Masvidal wins in December. But I like your idea. I like where your head's at with the Gilbert Burns fight. I just want to see Gilbert Burns get in there probably sooner than Colby's going to be able to. That's why I've been calling for him to fight Hamzat, because it looks like Hamzat's going to want to fight before the end of the year, you know?
Yeah.
So I think Colby's got a lot of options. He really does. I mean, even a Leon Edwards fight wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if Leon loses or something, you know?
Right.
He has a wealth of options. Even, I mean, Vicente Luque, like all these guys make sense at the top. You know?
And they're all fresh matchups.
Yeah. I mean, most of these guys, you know, Usman's fought a lot of these guys, but then you look around and there's a lot of fresh matchups for everybody else against each other.
Yep, for sure.
You know what I mean? So I think Colby's got a lot of options, and I'll be excited to see what he does next for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Co-main event. The wise words of one Brett Michaels. Every rose has its thorn. Anybody ever watched Dominic? I was mentioning to you off recording about my 8-year-old self and having this weird obsession with VH1 dating reality shows.
Yeah.
And this show was one that I probably watched the most. One, Rock of Love with Brett Michaels. Are you familiar with said show?
I am familiar with this, and I remember coming into the living room here and there, and, you know, mom and dad or one of them would be watching it, and they'd be like, go back to your room. You shouldn't be watching this show. That's what I remember more vividly. So that's why it's so funny that you just love this show very much. And it's also funny that this is not the first time this has even been brought up on the show. So it's clearly a very important piece of Noah's childhood.
Have I talked about that before?
This has been on an episode. I just don't remember which one.
Oh. Well, yes. As a reminder, I do love VH1 dating reality shows back when I was a kid.
Yes.
I don't even want to get into some of the other ones that I was watching. But it was that. It was MTV scripted reality shows like Parental Control, which I'm telling you guys, if you watch Parental Control as a kid, you might think back and go, "Oh, I love that show." Look it up on YouTube. That shit is awful, and I can't believe that as a kid I was almost convinced that was real life. How stupid am I?
It's all right. Anyways, you live and learn.
Anyways, co-main event. Rose Namajunas does retain against Zhang Weili via split decision. A razor-thin, close fight. Even more razor-thin than the main event.
Yes, for sure.
And I'll be up front that I scored this fight for the challenger, Weili. However, this fight was so close that I wouldn't have been upset either way it went. And the fact that Rose retained, I'm not going to scream robbery or anything like that. All in all, this fight was a bit slowed down in comparison to what we were seeing on this main card. not a high output necessarily, or I guess they had decent output. It just didn't have the moments necessarily of the main event, or obviously the highlight reel finish of a Cheeto Vera and Frankie Edgar that we'll get into, and then those first two fights on the main card were just fucking nuts. So, but I do think that this fight was very good, and what's hard to really assess this fight is both women came out and had similar mindsets to what their offensive output was going to be. Mm-hmm. They were heavy on the leg kicks early, setting up a lot of. They were doing a lot of combinations on the feet, but most of them were to set up a nice leg kick at the end.
Yeah,
and that was working early. And it seemed that Rose was getting the better of those exchanges early on, but Weili just has more power.
Yes.
So Weili was stunning Rose a few times. She seemed to be hurting her more, while Rose seemed to be landing at a more efficient clip, which kind of makes sense. But as this fight went on, it just kind of became a dogfight. It really was. Again, the room for error was so small because both women looked like they were fighting at the best of their ability.
Yeah.
That one round back and forth, super close, and then Weili gets a takedown.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, I guess that's the thing that's going to give her the round,
Exactly.
So round 5, though, when Rose gets the takedown, secures the top position for the majority of the round.
4 minutes.
Didn't do a ton of damage, and that was kind of my one complaint I had for round 4 for her when she got top control in that round, that she just wasn't doing a lot of ground and pound or anything. But she was trying in round 5 more so.
Yeah.
But, man, she was scaring me with jumping into up kicks and stuff.
Yeah,
I was
didn't like that.
Please stop doing that. However, round 5 did feel like a stamp where it was like, okay, MMA needs better scoring, because if you scored this like Pride fights used to be scored, where the end of a fight is more impactful to a score than the beginning of a fight, Rose clearly wins.
Yeah.
But that's not really the way it works. So she walks. It felt like she had won at the end, but then I had scored the fight for Weili because I had rounds 1 through 3 for her.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, I'm still kind of glad Rose won, but just an overall weird fight to score. I thought it was going to be a mess on the scorecards, and it kind of ended up being that way. But what were your thoughts, Dominic?
Yeah, I mean, again, as you said, as razor thin a fight you're going to see, one of the closest, if not the closest of the year that I can recall off the top of my head. Incredible fight. Just two athletes at the peak of their abilities in their prime. Zhang Weili, to her credit, you can tell she was working with Triple C because her wrestling was much improved and we saw her use it a lot more. She didn't do anything crazy with it, but I think that's also because Rose is no slouch on the ground either. She's dangerous off of her back. They were so evenly matched everywhere that this fight took place, and that's why it's such an incredible fight. I'm not as upset all of a sudden that they rebooked the rematch because of how great this fight was. But yeah, at the end of the day, Rose gets her hand raised. I scored 1, 4, and 5 for Rose, 2 and 3 for Zhang Weili. Round 1, so close. But yeah, just back and forth. So many just solid moments from both, but nothing that was overly dramatic, like Noah said with the other fights. But again, two at the absolute peak of their abilities. And it is just, we may just see these two fight again in the future. But for now, in the the near future, this chapter is closed. And I'm excited to see what comes next for both. Incredible performances. Hats off to each of them.
And I think both have rematches to look forward to next.
I believe so.
I think Rose Namajunas' next title defense will be against Carla Esparza. I think that's the fight that should happen next.
I hope.
Well, you don't have to say it like that, Dom. It looks like it's opened up for her now.
But Dana seems so iffy when he talks about Carla. People are saying like how Carla's wanting to sit and that she should deserve the title shot next. But in his post-fight presser, he's like, yeah, it's not in your best interest to sit out in the UFC. I don't know. Something feels off. I don't know if she's going to get it next without a fight. I hope so, though. I
mean, maybe you're right, but I think a lot of it depends on if the champion is available.
Mm-hmm.
How long of a layoff is Rose going to have? I could see her getting back in there March, April.
Spring, yeah.
But Will she? I don't know. It could, for all we know, it could be a year, Dominic. We know how this stuff goes.
Yeah.
It's not, we don't live in an ideal world where everyone recovers at an ideal pace and is able to get back to training at an ideal level to prepare them for an ideal fight. So I do kind of get what Dana's saying, where he doesn't, as a promoter, he's never going to advocate for a fighter to sit at home and wait for a fight to open up that may never open up for them. Sure, maybe he could have been more vocal that Carla at least had earned a title shot, but if Carla, was open to fighting Joanna again or Marina Rodriguez again, no doubt he would want to book that.
Yeah.
But obviously I think she's holding her ground for now, and she probably should, just to see how it plays out, see when Rose might be ready to come back. If it is March or April, no doubt I think Carla would be next.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a year from now, then Carla shouldn't wait. Then you're going to find yourself in a Leon Edwards situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think people need to just kind of, I understand that these people have earned these title shots. Carla in particular felt like she really earned it with her last win, especially. But timing plays such a factor. And while, yes, Carla probably should have been in the spot Weili was in Saturday, once you see the fight and Weili almost won again, how can you say anything after that?
Yeah.
It's just once the fight takes place, like, well, Weili almost won. She arguably did. And, I guess she was the deserving person for the shot. It's just, that's how I kind of look at it. But the other rematch, Weili's definitely got to run it back with Joanna. Am I right?
Yeah, that definitely seems next in the cards, especially we talked about Joanna last week where she's wanting these big fights. Well, this is basically the biggest you're going to get right now in this state of your career. A fight that was the fight of the year in 2020 makes all the sense in the world. Give them 5 rounds on a main event headliner on a fight night. Let's do it.
So you said main event headliner fight night. Yeah.
It's gotta be 5 rounds for that.
Yeah, I would agree. I would definitely agree with that. Yeah, I just I'd be excited to watch them run it back, obviously, due to the first fight. But again, cautiously optimistic almost, because no doubt there's no way that fight can live up to the first one, right?
Right.
Let's move into our opening bout of our pay-per-view main card. This might have been the best 3-round fight I've ever seen in my life.
This might be one of the best fights I've ever seen, period.
There's 3 fights that come to mind when I think of a 3-round fight that is just amazing. This one, Diego Sanchez versus Gilbert Melendez, UFC 166, and Chuck Liddell versus Wanderlei Silva. I believe that was a 3-rounder.
It was.
Those are the 3 that stick out to me. Now I'm sure there's more, so don't yell at me in the comments. But I'm just saying those are the ones that stick out to me. Justin Gaethje gets a unanimous decision win over Michael Chandler.
Yeah, a decision.
This is the perfect example, Dominic, of a fight where one guy gets his hand raised, one guy loses, but nobody comes out losing in this fight.
Mm-mm.
Gaethje gets the win, and he looks like he's going to be fighting for a belt next. And I'm going to take back everything I said. Everything I said about Islam Makhachev.
If you're doing it, I'm doing it too. I'm grabbing on.
I'm sorry, Islam. I know I said no matter what Justin Gaethje did, I thought he should be next. The resumes don't hold up. I'm sorry. The resumes don't compute. However, for this fight itself, this fight was everything, Dom. I don't even know how to start with it. I don't know where to start with Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, because this fight was everything.
Everyone knew that this fight was going to be nuts. It was one of the most anticipated fights of 2021. And it somehow performed better than what I could have imagined. Is that how? I don't understand. My brain does not
Okay, like me and you we're in the mindset of like this fight isn't going to go long enough to be anything more than just a really fun fight, but someone's going to get like they're going to put a stamp on this one. They're going to really plant their flag in the sand a little bit. But instead, this fight goes to a decision as an all-time classic. And these guys took a level of punishment that I'll never begin to understand how the human body is able to withstand, especially Michael Chandler.
Yeah.
In the later rounds, the low kicks were fucking killing him, or the calf kicks, and then, he started taking some wicked hands from Justin Gaethje.
He's spitting blood out of his mouth the whole fight.
I mean, this was just gutsy as hell from both guys, and it was back and forth. I thought Michael Chandler, I think the way you would score it is Chandler won round 1.
Yes.
Gaethje won rounds 2 and 3. This fight was all action from beginning to finish, and I didn't mention this at the beginning of the episode, I don't think, but this is the first time I've ever watched the pay-per-view. And then I drove a couple minutes back to my apartment and immediately turned back on Gaethje versus Chandler to watch it again after the post-fight press conference. I've never done that.
I don't blame you.
And it was just as amazing the second time watching it. I don't have any words. I don't even know how to break down what we saw here.
There's really nothing to know.
Okay, let me try. Let's try.
Okay.
So when it came to both chins held up.
Somehow. Don't know how.
We knew Justin Gaethje would probably hold. I mean, we expected at least that his chin would hold up better. Michael Chandler has had his chin tested. He got KO'd by one Charles Oliveira not too long ago. And in Bellator, he did have some quick knockout losses. That chin ain't bad, folks.
No.
He took the hardest of shots from one of the biggest power punchers in the entire division.
Mm-hmm.
And he got dropped once, but overall, besides that, he held up pretty well, I would say, considering the circumstances.
Oh, yeah.
Then you go to the kicks. Both guys just seemed to mirror each other very well. They both had similar plans of attack, again, throwing wicked right hands, powerful uppercuts, putting everything into these shots. And then they were both throwing a lot of kicks. And I thought early on, the guy who was getting the better of the kicking exchanges was Chandler.
Mm-hmm.
He threw a kick within a minute of the fight that almost Gaethje's leg just looked like it was frozen for a second. And then Gaethje just kind of backed him up to the fence and they had a crazy exchange there. And I went, oh man, Gaethje might have to go out on a shield. I'm like, his left leg looks compromised.
Yeah.
That didn't hold up. That did not hold up to be true because by the end, Michael Chandler could barely walk on that leg. Oh my God. There's so many moments in this fight, the Chandler spitting out blood, the crazy takedown where he picked him up and slammed him, but then Gaethje rolls it into where he's on his back.
Unreal. I mean, it showed the elite level. I know they didn't wrestle much, but that sequence alone showed the levels that these guys truly do possess in their skill set. And, my biggest takeaway in terms of what we saw in the octagon, from a skill set perspective, Justin Gaethje's uppercut is fucking phenomenal. And not only is it powerful, but it's super fast and he disguises it very well. He can have his hand here and very quickly turn it into an uppercut. He'll do a cartoon one where he'll bring it all the way from down under and land it. The way that he can land it in so many different ways is so unique rather than just your typical, the Tony Ferguson uppercut that he hit Gaethje with. That's kind of what you think about with a stereotypical one. But Gaethje, the way that he can disguise it and bring it with the speed and power that he does, and that was what dropped Chandler in that fight was the uppercut. Just brutal, and obviously his calf kicks are phenomenal. But this fight was just back and forth. Two guys going to the ultimate brink. It was where that horn sounded at the end of the fight, and you just knew they had nothing left to give. The gas tank was full, and it went all the way down to empty. The gas light was on. They gave us one of the best fights ever. I mean, it was unbelievable. Again, A fight that everyone thought was going to be awesome somehow performed even better. It's unfathomable to me. Incredible.
Now, we're going to get into what's next for these two because neither guy comes out looking bad from this. Both guys' stock only go up. We already mentioned Justin Gaethje should be next for the title.
Yes.
Islam Makhachev, you will fight someone like Beneil Dariush, and
I think that's what's going to happen. Yeah.
They actually, Dana all but confirmed that Beneil's actually going to be no, not that. Not that he's going to fight Islam. That Beneil's going to be the alternate for the title fight.
Makes sense.
But I'm sure that him and Islam will probably be next, I would say. But Justin Gaethje next for a title shot. After a performance like that, a fight like that, I mean, that's showing that you want it, you know. Don't get me wrong, Islam, amazing performance. But again, you look at the resume, that's his only win over a top 15 opponent. Dan Hooker. Great win. Only needs one more. But still, I think he's going to have to wait.
Yeah.
Justin Gaethje, you look at the resume that guy has. And
it's only fair.
Yeah. His last loss, he lost the title in a title fight, but it was to Khabib, who's now no longer in the division. So
he was the interim champ.
Yeah. Now let's talk about Michael Chandler. And before we talk about specifically what we want to see, we do have a voice message.
Oh, it's been a long time.
From a very familiar favorite of the show, our good friend, Tyler.
Mystic P back again. This time not with a prediction, but asking for the thoughts of the Joes. What a fantastic fight between Michael Chandler and Justin Gaethje. That lived up to every bit of hype. A 3-round war. I think the win went to the right guy. Both men fought an awesome fight. I mean, couldn't have gone any better. But here's my question. With Michael Chandler now 2 losses, thoughts from the Joes as a rank number 5, thoughts on Michael Chandler versus a returning Conor McGregor late in 2022. Love to know your thoughts. Keep doing awesome things, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tyler, for sending in your voice message. I just want to give a special shout out to Tyler and his wife, Kelsey. They are expecting.
Yes.
And, Tyler's been so good to me and Kelsey for that matter. And just can't wait to see how those two do as parents. They're going to be fantastic. And, just happy days are ahead,
Yes. A mini Mystic P is on the way.
But I do like where Tyler's head's at here. He's asking about Conor McGregor, and we know what a big fan he is of Conor McGregor. So I'm sure he saw this fight and was like, "Oh my God, Conor and Michael Chandler could be fireworks," And I agree. I do think it could be, and it is an interesting point for Michael Chandler. This is something I was going to bring up regardless, but he is 1-2 in the UFC, and while again both of his losses, I don't think his stock has gone down. He was a punch or two clean away from being the lightweight champion. And then here, I mean, you go to war like that, one of the all-time fights, how can you say your stock goes down? Didn't get finished in the fight, which is something that most people probably expected.
Yeah.
He comes out looking pretty good. But it will be something to monitor as he continues going. He is 1-2. So, you can have – it's good for a couple losses, but – if he continues to lose, even if he's looking fantastic and putting on amazing fights, how long until it's like, okay, this guy's he's good enough to hang with everybody at the top, but not necessarily beat anybody at the top,
Yeah.
However, I do love the idea of him versus Conor McGregor. I do. The big caveat is, when is Conor McGregor going to be ready?
Of course.
And I guess when is Michael Chandler going to be ready to fight again? Because he took a lot of damage.
No hurry.
But Conor obviously rehabilitating his leg. I am of the mindset that he could be ready to go by about a year from when it happened, so like next July. And if that's the case, I wouldn't be upset if Michael Chandler didn't fight until then and they did him versus Chandler. That fight would be phenomenal.
Massive.
And it would be huge. Michael Chandler, what really showed through in the lead up, he really knows how to sell a fight. he not only talks himself up, but he talks up his opponent, which is always key. If you're selling a fight, you don't want to just say your opponent sucks.
And it's like all authentic from him.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Did you see the new, like,
yes.
Tony Ferguson is the type of guy, and now you got Michael Chandler is like a they basically are acting like he's like a motivational speaker.
Reporter, Michael, how are you? Oh, I'm just an average man like everyone else. I've strapped up my boots, and I've seen those.
I do love it because it is kind of true, but like, I don't know. I like the guy. I can't help it.
Oh, yeah.
In a fight with Conor, I would be so happy to see him get that kind of opportunity. And for Conor, that's a great fight to come back to. Mm-hmm. Not an easy fight by any means. I was a little surprised that Tyler pitched it, only because, not because I think he's like, Conor can't win that fight. He definitely can, and that would be a great striking matchup. But Conor coming off such a hard injury, you almost want to see him, take a step back. Mm-hmm. Maybe fight no disrespect, but I'm going to say Tony Ferguson, just because I'm looking at Tony Ferguson as maybe a level down from these guys we're talking about right now. Mm-hmm. A lot of people won't agree with me on that. I'm sorry. You can yell at me in the comment section. That's fine. So while I love the fight, I have no reason to say otherwise. And honestly, that might even be the fight that I would most want next for Chandler, to be honest with you. What do you think, Dom?
Yeah, it is a great fight. One that Tyler has even discussed before in the past when we watched him fight Dan Hooker in January. So it would be fun. The styles clash perfectly. Both are great strikers in different ways. You have Chandler's wrestling. That's always going to be there, especially in a fight with Conor. You'd think he'd really want to use it. So I don't mind that fight to potentially be next because, again, as I kind of whispered, I'm in no hurry to see Michael Chandler again. Take your time, buddy. You earned a vacation, and a long one at that, after this war with Gaethje. So, reevaluate. We'll see you back in 2022. If Conor is not ready necessarily in that year time frame, so July of 2022, I think we're going to see Chandler fight someone else in the meantime. And I know Tyler specifically kind of said, well, maybe late in 2022 in the message. That could make more sense. But again, it just all comes down to, what does Conor want to do? Does he want to fight guys like this within the elite of the division? Does he want the trilogy with Nate? Does he want a welterweight guy? You know how Conor is. Does he want Max Holloway? We talked about that this week. So we'll see what he wants. But Chandler is one to not stray away from any challenge, and he would be more than welcoming to a fight with Conor. So I'm all for it. Will it come next? We'll see.
Well, that's the hardest thing about estimating when Conor McGregor will be back. It's not only the rehab, but it's also, there's so much that seems to go into getting a Conor McGregor fight booked. He has become even larger than that of the UFC as a whole. So it's almost just a timely process to even get him a fight. So because of that, just because he might be ready to start putting a training camp together in May or June or whatever, will he necessarily be ready to fight in July? Will he have pen to paper? I'm considering Conor's activity over the last few years, I wouldn't necessarily bet on it. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, then give me Michael Chandler versus the loser of our title fight in December.
Makes sense.
Again, there's just a lot of options for him because he's so fresh into this division.
Yeah, they're literally all new. Yeah.
And there's no bad answer here. He's 1-2, but the guy is clearly of the elite of the division.
Yes.
Now, the rest. And boy, is there a lot for this one as well. I tried to limit it, people, but besides those first three fights that Dominic mentioned, there was nothing else that we could really cut.
No.
So Marlon Vera gets the knockout of Frankie Edgar,
looking
the
like
biggest win of his career. 3 minutes, 50 seconds of round number 3. Interesting story here with this one, Dominic, because I would say Frankie Edgar was winning this fight.
I think I did actually have it. Yeah, I agree.
He secured takedowns in both rounds 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Had good top control.
Yeah.
Didn't do a ton of damage, but, played a very smart fight for the first 2 rounds. Round 3, though, even before the finish, Marlon Vera did appear to to be landing very well on Frankie. Frankie did seemed like he was not handling the punishment very well.
Mm-hmm.
And then an Anderson Silva style front kick to the face.
It looked like Marlon's foot went through Frankie's head. It was crazy.
It was set up just like it was set up perfectly because you saw Cheeto landing that kick, but it was to the body for quite a while in the fight.
Yep.
And then, of course, goes up high. Frankie's hands come down to block it to the body, lands flush on the face.
Setting it up all along.
And I thought the ref had a good stoppage here. I know Frankie was upset, but you can't blame him. The guy's once you've been knocked out, you don't really know where you're.
Yeah.
So let's not hold him to that very much. But it's just a weird fight because the biggest win for Marlon Vera for sure. And he comes out looking like an absolute savage from this. Yes. And we'll give him that shine. But let's start with Frankie Edgar because this is another knockout loss for him. You know, we last saw him against Corey Sandhagen where in about 30 seconds he took a flying knee straight to the chin and was out cold. You know, he's been knocked out by Korean Zombie before that. And before that, it was Brian Ortega. So for a guy who was known in his heyday, at his time and in his peak, as a guy who could withstand the punishment, who had so much heart, so much will, is this the end of the road for Frankie Edgar?
It should be, right? And we know that there were rumors of it coming in anyways. Now they didn't give him the mic or anything after, which is good. It was a bad knockout, but I'll be curious to see what comes from Frankie in these next couple of days if he decides to hang him up. And we're not one to like call for people to retire, but it just feels like it's the proper time. There's nothing left to prove if you're Frankie. There's no title shots there. There's no big fights left. I mean, this was a hard fight for him to take in Cheeto Vera. He's an absolute savage, as Noah said, by the way. And my stat of the night in regards to this fight, Cheeto Vera now holds the record for most finishes in bantamweight history with 9, and he's got 10 wins. So 9 of his 10 wins have come via finish. He's one of the most underrated guys, flies under the radar, and I know this division's stacked, but now he's just crashed into the top 10. So, but yeah, for Frankie, man, my hat's off to him. He's a legend. He's a Hall of Famer. And for me, it just feels like now is as right a time as ever.
So I'm going to feel a little differently. Now, we did talk about the potential for retirement on Friday. And what's interesting is right after we recorded that episode, I saw the quote where they asked Frankie about this. And his answer was, no, I have no interest in retirement. He said, I'll fight till, what do you say? I'll fight till they have to stretcher me out or something like that, which was,
that didn't age well.
Yeah. So we'll just walk over that one.
Yeah.
But what's weird though, Dominic, is in this fight, I thought Frankie Edgar showed that he was winning the fight until ultimately he gets knocked out. And what does that mean? In a lot of ways, it means that Frankie Edgar might have a more talented mixed martial artist than Cheeto. He might have a more well-rounded skill set. If this was a Frankie Edgar of 3 years ago, I think he wins this fight pretty easily. And it's because I don't think his skill set has diminished. It's just the chin is gone.
Yeah, it can only hold up
so it's this battle of like, okay, there are fights for him. I think a fight with Dominic Cruz would be great. No matter what happened, no matter if Cruz wins or loses his next fight, you know, Cruz might not be a guy that would – I couldn't necessarily see Cruz knocking out Frankie Edgar, but I could see it being a great fight.
Mm-hmm.
But again, is that what you want to do? Like, is that really what's left for Frankie, you know? Besides just fighting because he wants to fight. And
exactly.
If that's what he wants to do, that's fine. It's just, it's a little hard to watch this continue to happen. So it's tough because it feels like his skill set is still there. He just can't withstand the punishment anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you don't have any other thoughts on that one, Marlon Vera, with this win, he now moves in the top 10. He will be number 8, I believe, because that was Frankie's number.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, Dominic, how high is Marlon Vera's ceiling?
That's a good ass question, though, because he is just an interesting martial artist, man. He's well rounded, he's sharp, he's crisp, he's technical, powerful. Clearly, after what we saw last night, so he's got the skill set. But at the same time, I look at him and I'm like, is he going to compete with Sandhagen? Is he going to compete with Peter Yan? I don't know. TJ Dillashaw. So it's interesting, right? But he is another guy. Like I said, he's flying under the radar. He's going to be top 10. He's still only 29 years old. So he's super young, very experienced. I believe he could be in some fun ass fights in this division. I'm glad he's finally getting shine. He was on this main card. It was a big stage for him. He got the win over Sean O'Malley, which was huge, but a lot of people refuse to see it that way. Some do, we do, but this was big. And I love the thought of him actually getting the winner of the Munoz and Dominic Cruz fight, truthfully. But either way, I don't think you can go wrong matchmaking-wise for Cheeto because all these guys are going to be fresh matchups. He's been fighting so many people in that latter half or right on the cusp of top 15, but now he's launched himself in with these contenders. It's time to really test him with the Wolves.
Yeah, I really like Marlon Vera, but this is even higher than I thought he could really get. And yes, Frankie Edgar is someone who is, past his prime, but he had earned that number 8 spot in the bantamweight rankings. He beat Pedro Munoz in a very close 5-round fight. Yes, since then it hasn't been great, but Marlon Vera earned it, man. And it's just, he does have the loss to Jose Aldo, who's right there at number 5 in the rankings. So my head tells me right now that I don't know how much higher Marlon Vera can get, but I'd like to find out. And that's why him versus Corey Sandhagen is the fight that I want to see next. That's what I said when Corey Sandhagen lost. I said if Marlon Vera won that fight with Frankie, that fight would make a lot of sense, because I personally think, as good as Corey Sandhagen is, and as much as on paper, most people would probably side with Sandhagen in that fight, I need Sandhagen to – he's so young. I need him to take a step back. He's lost to literally the top 3 people in the division. He needs to go on a bit of a journey, a bit of a side quest, and rebuild himself and build himself even better. And I think a fight with Marlon Vera is something to bring a little bit out of him. Bring the dog out of him.
Yeah, that's a dog fight. Yeah.
And that's, again, I'm not just booking Marlon Vera in that fight because I think Marlon Vera is just going to get toasted. I think Marlon Vera, the guy continues to prove me wrong. So who's to say he can't win that fight?
Yeah, true.
I mean, look at how slick he was here. What his issues in this fight with Edgar was that he was having a hard time stopping the takedowns. Against Corey Sandhagen, it's not going to be an issue, pal.
Yeah.
But it will be an interesting striking matchup because those two are just so different in how they fight. Sandhagen's more on the finesse, while Cheeto's very stoic, slow-moving, bit of a prowler, if you will.
Yeah. I don't hate that at all.
Next one, Shane Burgos and Billy Quarantillo. If there was a reason that Michael Chandler and Justin Gaethje shouldn't have been the first fight of the night for the main card, is that it hurt this fight in some ways. Because Shane Burgos and Billy Quarantillo, well, Burgos got the win via unanimous decision, by the way. On any other card, it's fight of the night.
Yes.
It's probably in discussion for the fight of the year category even still, but it had to follow Gaethje Chandler, so the crowd was exhausted.
Yes.
They needed a breather, and they didn't get time for it. Dominic, tell me, what were your thoughts on this fight? You saw we're big fans of both guys. Burgos had a bit of a skid coming in, looking to bounce back, while Billy really trying to make that leap once again that he couldn't make with Gavin Tucker.
Yeah, I mean, we said on Friday that this was the fight we predicted to be fight of the night because we didn't think Gaethje Chandler would go 3 rounds. Well, shit, it did. And these two still put on a fight of the night performance in Burgos Quarantillo, but they just don't get rewarded for it. Incredible back and forth fight. Really, it was everything that I kind of had envisioned in my head, but just more output. They had over 700 combined strikes thrown in this bout. Billy looked phenomenal in round number 1, was piecing up Shane Burgos. But then rounds 2 and 3, Burgos comes on strong, especially in that like latter half of the second, really outstretched it. The third got a little bit closer, but it did kind of show the step up that Billy was taking. Burgos is a great fighter. He's 7-3 now in the UFC, and he's definitely top 15 caliber. Billy, I do believe, is right there as well. But it was Burgos' night. I agree with the judges' scorecards. Phenomenal fight, back and forth, all on the feet, up against the clinch with elbows and knees. I mean, you saw every bit of striking here from both these guys. Phenomenal war.
Yeah. I won't even add on to that because that was a perfect way to sum it up. I love both guys. Both guys come out looking strong here. It just seems that Billy maybe it's just a little too much too soon. But here soon, I think he's going to be ready for these kind of challenges.
Yeah. And a much needed win for Burgos it was too.
Yes, agreed. Good night for debuts, correct? You mentioned that on our Twitter account.
3-0.
Alex Pereira gets the TKO over Andreas Michailidis, round 2, 18 seconds in. You know what, Dominic? Actually, I have to admit, so funny thing about those debuts, you said we went 3-0 on debuts, but I thought we didn't count Contender Series, so technically we went 3-1 because CJ Vergara made his debut, right?
Oh, true. 3-1 for debutants.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we're still working under that.
Yeah, that's a UFC debut.
If you take out Contender Series, 3-0.
Then they went. Yeah. No, thank you for calling me out. Hold me accountable.
No. Don't. I didn't call you out. I just wanted to check with you. So Alex Pereira, the credited kickboxer, the man who had knocked out Israel Adesanya, which is literally, I'm surprised that wasn't his name on the ticker when they announced him. Surprised it didn't just say man who knocked out Israel Adesanya.
Yeah.
But he is much more than that, and he showed that here. He got tested by Michailidis again. Andreas, a much more well-rounded fighter at this point, but obviously didn't want to strike with Pereira for too long. So he tested him in the clinch and trying to grapple him. And he did a pretty good job of it, I would say, in round 1.
Yep.
But round 2 starts, again, not a ton of damage accumulated yet for Andreas. You know, he hadn't really gotten hit too much.
And then
a flying knee out of nowhere. I mean, really just, again, not like a Masvidal running head start.
No.
Literally just they're standing in front of each other, and then he just just jumps and throws it. And I can't believe, and no, poor Michailidis, the ref did not stop it right away. So then Pereira had to land another 1-2 on him while he was done.
Brutal.
And fight over. So, Dominic, this was a great debut, obviously, but for Alex Pereira. But did anything change for you in terms of your long-term outlook for Alex Pereira here, or do you still feel pretty much the same way about his long-term future?
Yeah, I'm still not going to just jump the gun on it. I mean, obviously, his striking is incredible. He's one of the best kickboxers in the world, though. That's expected. But MMA is a very, very vast game with a lot of skill sets, and he's 34 or 35. The age doesn't help him in his long-term journey here in the UFC. But if he continues training, if he can just keep fights on the feet, he's got a chance against anyone in this division. But we're talking a very solid division. You look at the top of this division specifically with Izzy and Whitaker and Vettori, Costa, so on, Brunson, 2 of those guys being very good wrestlers, by the way. There are challenges ahead, and I know I'm looking way ahead. He's not even ranked yet. I get it. I'm just saying, long-term, if that's his goal, there's a shit ton of hard fights for him to get there. So I'm excited to see him fight again. That's for sure. Again, his striking's incredible. A flying knee knockout in your debut. Welcome to the UFC, bud. Here's your $50K bonus. So it was absolutely amazing. He did show decent takedown defense, but Michailidis was just so pressure forward in that first round. He was ultimately going to get taken down. You just kind of knew it. But all in all, he didn't look terrible, and he looked relatively calm as well. So I'm excited to see what could be next in terms of like matchmaking, what the UFC will do.
I am very curious to see what the UFC does with him next, because I did see some whispers of like, oh, this guy could be a real, not necessarily, they weren't saying like, oh, this guy could be a threat to Adesanya, but it was, once he made his debut, I think when they were talking to Dana, they're like, yeah, so this Pereira looks like he could really be a threat, for this division. And I'm like, oh, okay, so like we're already looking at this guy like he's a top 15.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if the UFC, how much they're going to fast track him. How much is he going to start facing some real tests? Because top 15 of middleweight, again, we've talked about it, Dominic, not a ton of grapplers. You got Derek Brunson, who seems to be kind of the lone guy in that really top of the heap there. But I'll be interested to see what kind of matchups he gets, Pereira, that is moving forward. And for all we know, he could be climbing to contendership status very quickly, and I wouldn't be surprised at this point.
If he keeps doing stuff like this, he'll be there in no time.
True. Following that, we had a bit of a throwback fight as Bobby Green gets the TKO over Al Iaquinta. Round 1, 2 minutes, 25 seconds in. Didn't expect this, but you know what? This might be the best performance of Bobby Green's career.
He looked phenomenal.
The guy is a fantastic boxer. We've said that, and it's always been about having a well-rounded skill set for him.
Yep.
He tends to struggle when anybody kind of brings some wrestling into the fray. But here with Al, Al's a guy who could do that. He could change levels. He could mix it up. He's got good hands, but he does have good wrestling. Didn't really get a chance to even show that here.
Mm-mm.
And this going off of, Bobby Green was coming off of a loss, but in a fight with Fiziev, who I highly value that fight for Bobby Green, even as that was a very close fight that was fought entirely on the feet. And considering how good of a striker Fiziev is,
yep,
amazing for Bobby Green at this point in his career to still hold up with him. Dare I say, Bobby Green might be underrated at this point.
Well,
we enjoyed him on his comeback. We've enjoyed him when he was fighting in the Apex. He was the king of the Apex. Then he had the very close loss to Thiago Moises, I believe it was.
Yep.
Lost to Fiziev. But I think this guy might be a top 15 guy. I really do. I love Bobby Green, but with performances like this, and even the Fiziev fight showed me more than decision wins over, I forget who he had, like Clay Guida or
a couple
someone
of those.
like that. Those were good wins, but I was just like, I'm happy to see Bobby get back in there. But then these last two fights have showed me that he's really good.
Oh, yeah, and Al Iaquinta's tough, man. You can't just put him away. And he pieced him up and then made him face plant. Bobby looked phenomenal. His boxing is always so crisp, but he was on another level at UFC 268.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully you guys put some money on this one. The biggest underdog to cash in on the night, Chris Curtis, gets the first round TKO in his UFC debut against Phil Hawes. 4 minutes, 27 seconds of round 1. Very interesting how both guys come from the Contender Series, but Curtis was not given a contract. Phil Hawes was, and then it plays out like this. Now, the reason why I was a bit – so I mentioned in our group chat. So I always, every time the UFC on fight day, when they send out the card, I go through and I just circle my winners. And I just keep track of them. I just want to see how good I am at picking fights,
On an Excel sheet, of course.
No, just in my camera roll.
Okay.
But thank you. I originally picked Chris Curtis, and then I fucking switched. As I did with a lot of fights on this night. I was changing.
Yeah, you were on one.
The UFC 268 was a hard card to really pick for me. But regardless, I didn't think the odds really did this fight justice, and especially Chris Curtis, a guy who has had an interesting career. He's retired multiple times. He did have that bout on the Contender Series. Didn't get a contract, but looked really good. And then he makes his first fight here, and he's a better fighter than I thought people were giving him credit for. Not your average debut,
Mm-mm.
And Phil Hawes, while he has looked really good up to this fight in the UFC, he had been unbeaten, I believe, in the UFC. And outside of the Imavov fight, which now looks even better, I guess, but it was a bit of a dud. He's really been dominating people. He's looked fantastic. But I remember his first fight on the Contender Series where he got knocked out cold. So I knew that there was some potential for that. If you can land well on Phil Hawes and if you can pressure him well, he can wilt. It's happened. I've seen it on a UFC product. And that's kind of what happened here. Chris Curtis getting a huge win, a huge debut for him. And he, depending on how long he's wanting to hang around, that win could have catapulted him in the top 15 conversation. Phil Hawes was right there.
Oh, yeah. Phil was right there. And now Chris Curtis, he's 27-8, man. This is a guy that has been being called on. He's retired. He's been tested. He's been in the PFL. He's retired. He's unretired. He's been on the Contender. And now he's in the UFC. And it faced adversity in this one, too. Phil Hawes looked great early on in this fight. Really damn good. And then Chris Curtis to bounce back with the counters and then finish him. Whew. Also, shout out Cincinnati, Ohio, baby. Chris Curtis, an Ohio boy.
I didn't realize that until you told me.
I didn't either until they said it last night.
Nasruddin Imavov gets the TKO over Edmund Shabazian, 4 minutes, 42 seconds of round number 2. The biggest win of Imavov's career. I knew the UFC had seen potential in him based on the way they were kind of booking him as of late. And he does cash in with a big win here. He's going to catapult him in the top 15. He looked phenomenal here. Fantastic. The bigger story, though, Dominic.
Yes.
There's got to be the fall of Edmund Shabazian. This shows how crazy this sport can be.
Yep.
This man was looked at as like the golden goose on the precipice of contendership if he would have beat Derek Brunson. And then since that loss to Derek Brunson, it's just been all downhill.
And he's getting smashed. Yeah. They're not even close.
These are three straight losses, right? It's Brunson, Hermanson, and now Imavov, right?
Yep.
So 3 straight losses is tough, but you know, other people have went through 3 fight loss, had 3 fight skids before, right? You know, but it's the fashion of the losses that's alarming. He's getting smashed, and it seems like it's a similar way. Whenever he's going up against someone who can out-muscle him, that has more strength than him and can take him down to the ground, he just doesn't seem to have much of a response for that.
Yeah.
So with the 3 straight losses, if you're the UFC, what do you do with Edmund Shabazian?
You got to really just almost reset, you know, a reset on this career. He's what is he, like 24, 25?
23.
23 still? I mean, shit. I know it's been tough, but they really did throw him into the wolves with Brunson. I picked Brunson in that one. I thought that was crazy. But then to see again the Hermanson, now Imavov, and they're all great fighters, but we got to really take a step back. I know Imavov was like unranked, but he has ranked potential. It's obvious. He looked phenomenal. So you know, again, 23, super young. You're on a 3-fight skid. I don't think he's going to get like cut or anything. I do think the UFC does believe in the kid. I mean, they were pushing him like crazy when he was undefeated. So let's not just throw in the towel on his career because he is so young, but there's clear holes that need to be patched up. So really, and I'd like to see a long layoff for the kid too. He's been relatively active with these fights. So take a break, step back, to mellow out and see what happens. Matchmaking wise, I don't really know. I don't know. You got to give him a striker maybe if you're the UFC. You can't give him another grappler like this.
Well, I mean, I guess you're right. Like, if you want him to if you want the best chance of him winning or having a good performance, then yeah. But what'd Dana say? Is that what we do here? You know,
they do and they don't.
I know they do and they don't. Yeah. But I think you might be misremembering that Brunson fight because, while yes, you did pick him, and I do give you credit for that. We were very conflicted on that fight going in. I mean, you told me the night of, you said, you know, I just so happened to I just had a feeling today. You're like, I just had a feeling, and I'm going with Brunson. Yes, in hindsight, fed to the wolves, sure, but that was the reality at the time, was that he was looked at as that level.
Yeah, like the future. Yeah.
And that, I mean, we both thought that. it just hasn't paid off since.
Yeah.
And it just seems to have gotten worse and worse. And the same holes are being exposed every time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just he's not being able to really fill those holes.
Yeah. It's
so
odd.
You're right. I'm thinking take some time off, come back. I want to see him against a grappler though when he does come back, because if he comes in against a striker and knocks him out, okay, awesome. You've done that before.
Yeah.
Can you stay off your back? And if you are on your back, do you have any sort of defense if you're in the bottom?
You're right.
Ian Gary, another debut.
Welcome.
Gets the knockout of Jordan Williams with the second to spare in round number 1. Dominic, he calls himself the future. Do you think he's the future?
I love this kid. I texted it in the group chat. And not to mention, by the way, Jordan Williams looked good in this fight. And he was winning this round convincingly too. But, man, Ian Gary got this knockout, again, with 1 second left. He was moving backward and landed the right hand. It was so clean, so precise. You can really just see the true power that he has. This guy just feels like a special talent. He's 8-0, 6 of them via finish, Cage Warriors champion, 170 pounds, from Ireland. There's a lot of stuff about him that can really build him into a star. He's wanting to follow in Conor's footsteps. His post-fight interview with Joe Rogan was incredible. Checked every single box. Confident, little bit of cocky, but not overbearing. Friendly to the fans. His fight style's fun. This kid really could be the future. Welterweight needs like some young talents like this, so he's throwing a wrench into things. 23 years old, insane, and I really believe that this kid has a high ceiling. I loved it.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what's next for him, but it is true that Jordan Williams was landing good shots on him in this fight, so I definitely think he definitely needs to be brought along at a pace.
Yes.
It's not fast track, That's exciting. Again, this is a bit of a Paddy Pimblett situation for me, where not to the same degree, but like, let's just calm down. I get it, how exciting these guys are, and I like both of them, but they need to develop. They're still so young.
There's nothing wrong with that.
There's no reason that they, saw someone asking, I think Robbie Fox asked Dana about Paddy Pimblett. He's saying, we need to have Paddy Pimblett headlining a card next year. And I'm like, Robbie, come on, dude. Like, I get it. He works for Barstool, and he's very exciting fighter. But guys, let's slow down.
Yeah.
These guys need time.
Yeah. But
regardless, Ian Gary, great debut. Poor Jordan Williams, man. That's a tough way to.
Yeah.
When you're essentially winning the round, and then, I mean, it was the one punch. He was out cold, man.
Yes. Yeah.
That was the only KO. Well, that and Frankie Edgar, those were the only two like straight up KOs of the night, and man, to happen in that fashion was nuts.
And now he's 0-3 in the UFC.
Yeah, I still would like to see him get another fight, though, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
But who knows? Last one here. Did not think we'd talk about this fight, to be honest with you. Chris Barnett gets the TKO over Jean Vellante.
Yeah.
2 minutes, 23 seconds of round number 2.
Yeah.
And he did it with a wheel kick.
They say what?
That's right.
We got heavyweights doing wheel kicks now in the UFC.
And especially a heavyweight that kind of looks like me.
He's
kind of got, we have like the same body type. I'm like,
he's like a freak of nature, though, like athletically. He's dancing when he comes out. He's doing flips, spinning wheel kicks. This dude, I don't know.
What's funny is he was known for this before the UFC. Like on the regionals, he was very known for his flashy style and stuff. But he had a short notice debut against Ben Rothwell, and Ben Rothwell's been around for a long time.
Yes.
But after that fight, I couldn't help but just go, maybe Barnett's just one of those guys that's like kind of meant to be a regional product. Like maybe he's just not really UFC caliber. The style just doesn't really mesh in the UFC.
Yeah.
Then he comes out and does this. And I get it. It's Jean Vellante, who has just had a weird go of things the last couple of years, but this was his retirement fight.
Yes.
He was in his home state of New York, obviously. So somehow by the end of this whole thing, what I thought coming in was going to be kind of the shit fight of the night, I ended up almost getting a little misty-eyed. Chris Barnett made me care about Jean Volante's retirement.
His post-fight interview was so good, man. This guy is just such a ball of energy. I'd pay money to have the energy this dude has. And he's like 35 years old. Damn.
You should look up his post-fight scrum because he was same level of energy in that one. And
I'm going to have to.
He speaks like it was almost like, imagine if like you went to bed tonight and you made a wish to be in the UFC. And then you woke up tomorrow and you had the skill set of an MMA fighter and you got booked in a fight in the UFC and all that. And it had that kind of energy of like someone who's never been there before, who's like never would have thought they'd be in this moment, you know?
Yeah.
He's like a fan at the same time, you know?
He's such a happy person.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really like his energy. And with that kind of fight style, man, if he can really pull off stuff like that, if he can really fight that kind of fight, I mean, we might joke now, but he might become a real threat in this otherwise thin heavyweight division.
Yeah, true. And to finish this off, he had the quote of the week, by the way, for Fight Week by saying him versus Jean Volante was the Wish version of DC and Stipe Miocic, and I about pissed myself when I heard him say that. So Chris Barnett, damn, this guy is just as fan-friendly as they come.
Yeah. That's going to wrap it up for the MMA Weekend Recap. Give us your thoughts on these fights. Anything, any takeaways, anything about the fights themselves?
We know you guys got them.
Yeah. We'll be back on Friday with the weekend preview.
This guy's back.
Max Holloway versus Yair Rodriguez. I believe UFC or Bellator 271 is also this.
Chris Cyborg defending the title.
Chris Cyborg versus Sinead Kavanaugh. So going to be a couple of good cards to look out for. And, of course, well, we won't be talking about it on Friday, but Alaska Fighting Championship 161.
Tune in on Wednesday night and watch that.
But until then, Dominic, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
Find me on Twitter, on Instagram, at DSlee14. More importantly, go follow, go engage, go interact with the show on Twitter, on Instagram, at BAJ_MMA podcast.
And for me, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, at NTBaker_. If you go to my bio, there is a link that will take you to the link tree, which presents you a list of links to all the platforms the podcast is on, along with social media platforms. So that includes,
but it's not limited to.
It kind of is.
A little.
The Twitter, the Instagram, the YouTube channel, and Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcast. It's all on there. And there's a couple links for today's sponsor, Anchor.
Shout out.
First, leaving a voice message. You saw Tyler, heard him. Well, at this point, you saw him probably. If you're watching on Spotify, you're watching on YouTube. Everybody's watching nowadays.
That's right.
So you heard Tyler and his voice message. So if you would like to have your voice featured on the show, your question featured on the show, use that link. Send us in up to 60 seconds. We will feature it. And also there's a link on there if you want to become a supporter of the podcast. Just provides us with a few dollars a month. All that money goes back into improving the quality of the podcast. But that's it. We're out. And we'll see y'all on Friday.